The baby shower punch tasted like betrayal, though I didn't know it yet. Pink and blue balloons floated above us while I watched my sister-in-law unwrap tiny onesies. And that's when my brother leaned over with that casual smile he'd perfected over 47 years. "Oh, by the way, we had to use your name to secure a loan. The house repairs couldn't wait." The plastic cup slipped from my fingers. $25,000. My inheritance. My name. Their debt. The pastel decorations suddenly looked garish, the laughter around me hollow and mocking. But let me back up, because 3 months earlier, I thought I had the perfect family. We weren't wealthy, but we were close, or so I believed. My parents had passed within 6 months of each other 2 years ago, leaving behind a modest 3-bedroom house in Phoenix and about $80,000 in savings to split between me and my 2 brothers. I was the middle child, 52 years old, never married, worked as a dental hygienist for 28 years at the same practice. My life was predictable in the best way. Sunday dinners at Marco's house, helping Elena with her garden, watching my nephews grow up. When my older brother Victor suggested we keep the family house instead of selling it, I agreed immediately. It felt right. Mom's rose bushes still bloomed in the backyard. Dad's workshop tools hung exactly where he left them. We decided Victor and his wife Carmen would live there since they had 3 kids and needed the space. Elena and I would help with the mortgage until they could take it over completely. Family first, always. I gave them the benefit of every doubt. When they were late with their share of the mortgage payments, I covered it. When they needed new appliances because the old ones finally died, I helped pay. When Victor's hours got cut at the warehouse, I took on extra shifts at the dental office, working 4 10-hour days instead of my usual 3/8. My back ached constantly. My feet swelled in my shoes, but what's family for if not to help each other through rough patches? Carmen would hug me and say I was a saint. Victor called me his rock. I believed them because I wanted to believe them, because acknowledging anything else would mean admitting I was being used. Looking back now, I can see the pattern so clearly, it makes me nauseous. Every request started small and reasonable. "Can you watch the kids this Saturday? We have a wedding to attend." Of course I could. Then it became every other Saturday. Then it was weeknights too, because Carmen had book club and Victor had his poker games. I remember one particular evening when I'd canceled a date with Robert, the kind man from the church choir who'd been asking me out for months. I'd finally said yes. We'd planned to try that new Italian restaurant downtown, and I'd even bought a new dress. Then Victor called. Emergency at work. Carmen was stuck in traffic. Could I please pick up the kids from school and stay with them until they got home? It would just be an hour, maybe 2. It was 5 hours. I sat at their kitchen table, helping my nephew with his math homework, warming up chicken nuggets for dinner, watching the clock tick past 7, then 8, then 9. Robert sent me a text at 7:30 asking if I was okay. I replied that I was so sorry. Family emergency? Could we reschedule? He said, of course. We never did reschedule. He stopped asking. I convinced myself it wasn't meant to be anyway, that my family needed me more than I needed romance at my age. What a lie, I told myself. The financial requests followed the same pattern. It started with $20 here and there for groceries, then $100 for school supplies, then $500 when the car broke down, then $1,000 when Victor's hours got cut. Each time they promised to pay me back. Each time I told them not to worry about it. I had savings from my years of living simply, never taking vacations, never buying anything extravagant. What was I saving it for anyway? At least this way, the money was helping people I loved. Except the requests never stopped. They only grew larger, more frequent, more urgent. And my savings account grew smaller and smaller until I was living paycheck to paycheck just like them, except they had 3 kids to show for it, and I had nothing but the warm feeling of being needed. The thing about being the reliable one is that it becomes your entire identity. People stop seeing you as a person with needs and start seeing you as a resource to tap. I sacrificed my weekends to babysit so Victor and Carmen could have date nights. I sacrificed my vacation days to watch the kids when they had school breaks and no childcare. I even sacrificed a relationship once, a man I'd been seeing who wanted me to move to Tucson with him. Because how could I leave when my family needed me? I told myself it was love. I told myself this was what good families did, but really I had no boundaries left. I was a well that everyone drank from, and nobody ever thought to ask if I was running dry. The cracks started small. Carmen stopped calling me just to chat. Our conversations became transactional. She needed this. Could I help with that? Victor stopped making eye contact when he asked for money. Elena, my younger sister, who lived in Scottsdale with her husband, seemed increasingly uncomfortable at family gatherings, but I dismissed it as her being busy with her own life. Then came the baby shower. Carmen's sister was having her 4th child, and I'd driven across town with a gift basket I'd spent 2 hours assembling, filled with organic baby products and hand-knitted blankets I'd made myself. I was genuinely happy to be there, happy to celebrate new life, happy to belong to something bigger than just me and my studio apartment and my dental charts. That's when Victor dropped the bomb, casual as ordering coffee. We used your name for a loan. The room didn't actually spin, but it felt like it should have. My chest got tight. The cheerful chatter around me turned into white noise. I managed to whisper, "What do you mean you used my name?" He waved his hand dismissively, like I was overreacting to a minor scheduling conflict. The bank wouldn't give us enough based on our credit, so we added you as a co-signer. Just a formality. We're making the payments. Except I never signed anything. I never agreed to anything. And the way Carmen avoided my eyes told me everything I needed to know. I tried to keep my composure. Around us, people laughed and cooed over tiny shoes and rattles. Someone cut the cake. The mom-to-be opened another present, and I sat there feeling like the floor had opened beneath my chair. "When did this happen?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Victor shrugged. 6 months ago? Maybe 7? "Don't worry about it, Maria. We've got it handled." But his eyes wouldn't meet mine, and Carmen had suddenly become very interested in refilling the punch bowl, her back to me, shoulders tense. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and demand answers in front of everyone. But I'm not that person. I've never been that person. So I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face looked pale, drawn, older than my 52 years. My hands were shaking. I pulled out my phone and tried to search for information about co-signers and loans. But my vision was blurry, and the words on the screen didn't make sense. All I could think was, they used my name. They forged my signature. They took something from me without asking, and they expected me to just accept it. I left the shower early, mumbling something about not feeling well, which wasn't a lie. I drove home in a fog, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I got to my apartment, I tore through my filing cabinet looking for any paperwork I might have signed and forgotten. Nothing. I checked my credit report online for the first time in years. There it was. A loan for $25,000, opened 6 months ago, in my name, tied to the family house. My credit score had dropped 112 points. Late payment flags dotted the report like red warning lights I'd somehow missed. Have you ever felt like the floor disappeared beneath you? Like everything solid you'd built your life on was actually just cardboard and spit? That's where I was. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with cold coffee and tried to understand how the people I loved most in the world could do this to me. The thing that kept me up wasn't even the money. It was the betrayal. The casual way Victor had mentioned it, like using someone's identity without permission, was just another family favor, no different than borrowing a cup of sugar. The apartment was too quiet. I kept replaying the moment over and over, the way he'd leaned in, almost conspiratorially, like he was sharing good news. The way Carmen had looked away. Had they planned that moment? Had they discussed how to tell me? Or had Victor just decided on the spot that a crowded baby shower was the perfect place to drop that bomb, knowing I wouldn't make a scene? The more I thought about it, the more calculated it seemed. They knew exactly what they were doing. I pulled up the loan documents from my credit report. There was my signature, or a pretty good approximation of it. Who had forged it? Victor? Carmen? Had they practiced first, tracing my signature from old birthday cards or Christmas checks? The thought made me sick. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was planned, deliberate, criminal, and they'd been making late payments, damaging my credit further with each passing month, while I sat in their kitchen babysitting their children, completely unaware that my financial future was being destroyed. The next morning I called Victor. He didn't answer. I called Carmen. She texted back that they were busy with the kids. I called Elena, and she finally picked up on the fourth ring. "I was wondering when you'd find out," she said quietly. My stomach dropped. "You knew." Silence. Then, "They told me last month. I said it was wrong, but Victor said you wouldn't mind, that you'd understand it was for the family. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't want to cause problems." I hung up without saying goodbye. Even my youngest sister, the one I'd helped through college, the one whose wedding I'd helped pay for when her fiancé's family backed out, even she had chosen their comfort over my right to know. That phone call with Elena broke something in me. She was supposed to be different. She was the baby of the family, the one who'd always been more sensitive, more aware of other people's feelings. We'd been close growing up. She'd confided in me about her first heartbreak, her struggles with anxiety, her fears about getting married. I'd been her maid of honor. I'd held her hand in the hospital when she had her appendix out. And she'd known for a month that Victor and Carmen had committed fraud in my name, and she'd said nothing. She'd sat across from me at Sunday dinner 3 weeks ago, watched me bring homemade enchiladas, watched me play with her kids, and she'd said nothing. I called her back. She answered immediately this time. "Maria, I'm so sorry, You knew for a month," I said. My voice was steady, cold. "You knew they forged my signature. You knew they were destroying my credit, and you said nothing." "I didn't know what to do," she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. "Victor said you'd agreed to help, that you knew about it. I didn't realize you didn't know until he mentioned telling you at the baby shower. Maria, I swear, I thought you were in on it. And when you found out I wasn't, when Victor told you he was going to break the news to me, you didn't think to warn me, to give me a heads up?" Silence, then softly. "I thought it would be worse if it came from me. I don't know what I thought. I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry," I said, "but nobody's actually doing anything to make it right." I hung up again. I believed that stress excused behavior. I'd spent years telling myself that Victor's short temper was just because he was worried about money, that Carmen's coldness was just her being overwhelmed with kids, that asking me for help wasn't manipulation, it was trust. I had justified everything, convinced myself that if I just held on a little longer, things would get better. The baby would come, Victor would get a promotion, Carmen would go back to work, and we'd all laugh about this stressful period over Thanksgiving dinner. But the bank statement in my hands told a different story. They weren't stressed. They were calculating. They'd forged my signature. They'd knowingly damaged my credit, and they'd expected me to just accept it because family first, right? That's when I understood the true cost of my sacrifices. I'd given up so much of myself that there was barely anything left to defend. I had no partner to support me because I'd chosen family over relationship after relationship. I had no savings buffer because I'd spent it covering their expenses. I had no close friends because I'd canceled plans so many times to help with their emergencies that people stopped inviting me. My life had shrunk to the size of their needs, and when they needed a scapegoat for their financial problems, I was right there, convenient and compliant. The reliable one. The one who wouldn't make waves. But something shifted in me that day. I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, really looked, and saw someone I barely recognized. When had I become so small? When had I decided that being loved meant being used? My mom used to tell me that family was everything, but she also told me to stand up for myself, to know my worth. I'd remembered the first part and forgotten the second. I thought about calling Victor again, demanding answers, but what would that accomplish? He'd make excuses. Carmen would cry. They'd tell me I was being selfish, that they were just trying to keep the family home, that I should understand. And God help me, part of me still wanted to believe them. I took the next day off work, something I never did, and I went to a lawyer. The consultation cost $200 I didn't really have, but I needed to know where I stood. The attorney, a woman maybe 10 years younger than me, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "You're not the first person I've seen this happen to," she said. "Family members forge signatures more often than you'd think. The question is, what do you want to do about it? You could press charges for identity theft and fraud. You could sue for damages, or you could try to work it out privately." The words identity theft and fraud made my stomach turn. Those were serious crimes. Those were things that happened to other people, not to families like mine. She pulled out a folder and started showing me documentation. In Arizona, identity theft is a Class 4 felony when the amount exceeds $3,000, she explained. Your brother could face up to 3 years in prison if convicted. The civil side is separate. You could sue for the full amount of the loan plus damages to your credit, emotional distress, attorney fees. But litigation takes time and money. "How much time?" I asked. "Could be anywhere from 18 months to 3 years for a civil case. Criminal prosecution would be up to the district attorney, not you, once you file a police report." 3 years. The number hung in the air between us. I thought about Victor sitting in a courtroom, Carmen in the gallery crying, their kids confused and scared. I thought about family gatherings torn apart, about being the villain in everyone's story. What if I just want them to pay it back? What if I want to make sure they can never do this again? She nodded like she'd heard this before. You can file a police report and then choose not to cooperate with prosecution. The report itself creates a paper trail that protects you. You can also place a fraud alert on your credit, freeze your accounts, and demand they refinance the loan without you. But understand, if they don't cooperate, your options narrow to legal action or accepting the debt. I asked her what she'd do. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'd protect myself first and worry about their feelings second. But that's not advice. That's personal opinion. I thanked her and left with a folder full of information I wasn't sure I'd ever use. On the drive home, I called Victor one more time. He answered, finally, and I could hear kids screaming in the background. "We need to talk," I said. "About what?" Like he didn't know. Like he genuinely couldn't imagine why I might be upset. About the $25,000 loan you took out in my name without asking me. A pause. Then, "You're making a big deal out of nothing. We're making the payments. It's fine." But it wasn't fine. 3 of those payments had already been late. "I saw a lawyer today," I said. The silence on the other end was profound. Even the kids screaming seemed to fade into the background. "Victor, what you did is identity theft. It's a felony. I could press charges." "You wouldn't do that," he said, but his voice had lost its casual confidence. "We're family." Family doesn't forge signatures, Victor. Family doesn't destroy someone's credit without permission. Family asks. "We were desperate." His voice rose, defensive now. The house was falling apart. The roof was leaking so bad we had buckets in every room. The plumbing was shot. We didn't have any other options. You had the option to ask me. You had the option to be honest. Would you have said yes? He challenged. The question hung there. Would I have? Probably, and they knew it, but they'd taken that choice away from me anyway. That's not the point, I said. The point is, you didn't give me the chance. You just took what you wanted. They kept talking, but I couldn't hear them anymore over the sound of my own heart breaking. Victor explained that the house needed a new roof, new plumbing, foundation work. You know how old the place is, he said. If we didn't fix it now, it would cost twice as much later. I asked why they didn't tell me, why they didn't ask. Because we knew you'd worry, Carmen chimed in, apparently on speaker now. We were trying to protect you. Protect me by destroying my credit and putting me in debt? Protect me by committing fraud? I wanted to scream, but my voice came out flat and dead. I need to see proof that you're making the payments. Victor sighed like I was being difficult. Fine, I'll send you the statements. He never did. Days passed, then a week. I called the bank directly and found out the payment due that month hadn't been made yet, and we were coming up on the late fee deadline. I paid it myself, $573 I couldn't afford because I couldn't let my credit get worse. And that's when I realized something that made me physically ill. They were never going to pay this loan. They'd taken it out knowing I'd be stuck with it, knowing that the reliable sister would never let the family house go into foreclosure, never let their credit be destroyed alongside hers. They'd counted on my love to trap me in their debt. I wish I could tell you I confronted them immediately, that I was strong and clear-headed. But the truth is, I cried for 3 days straight. I called in sick to work again, which my boss didn't appreciate, and I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling trying to figure out how my family had turned into strangers. Or maybe they'd always been strangers, and I'd just been too blinded by my need to belong to see it. I kept thinking about every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd said yes when I wanted to say no, every birthday I'd spent alone because I was babysitting their kids. And for what? So they could use me one more time? On the second day of my breakdown, my phone rang. It was my boss, Dr. Patterson, calling to check on me. I almost didn't answer, but I needed this job now more than ever. Maria, this isn't like you, he said. Is everything okay? And something in his genuine concern broke through my isolation. I found myself telling him everything. Not the details, just the broad strokes. Family betrayal, financial fraud, didn't know what to do. Take the rest of the week, he said. Paid. You've worked here 28 years and never taken a sick day you didn't actually need. Take the time. Figure out what you need to do. But Maria, he paused. Whatever you decide, make sure you're protecting yourself. Family is important, but so are you. After we hung up, I sat there stunned. My boss, who I'd always thought of as just professionally pleasant, had shown me more care in that 5-minute conversation than my own family had in months. The contrast was devastating and clarifying at the same time. But crying doesn't pay bills, and it doesn't fix credit scores. On the 4th day, I got up, washed my face, and started making a plan. I couldn't undo what they'd done, but I could stop them from doing it again. I went to my bank and put a freeze on my credit. I changed all my account passwords. I got a P.O. box so my mail would stop going to an address they knew. I felt paranoid doing it, like I was overreacting. But then, I'd remember the casual way Victor had told me about the loan at a baby shower, surrounded by cake and presents, and I'd know I wasn't being paranoid enough. I also found something unexpected during this time. I started going back to church, something I hadn't done regularly since my parents died. I wasn't looking for religion exactly, more like refuge, a place to sit in silence and not have to pretend everything was okay. One Sunday after Mass, an older woman I'd seen around but never spoken to approached me. "You look like you're carrying the world," she said. I almost brushed her off, but something in her eyes stopped me. We got coffee. I told her a version of my story, vague enough to protect my privacy. She listened the way the lawyer had, without judgment, and when I finished, she said something I'll never forget. Forgiveness doesn't mean being a doormat. You can forgive someone and still protect yourself from them. That conversation led me to her church's spiritual counseling program. I met with Sister Margaret, a 70-something nun who'd spent 40 years working with families in crisis. She didn't try to tell me what to do. She just asked questions that made me think. What do you gain by continuing to enable their behavior? Nothing. What do you lose by setting boundaries? Potentially my family, but maybe I'd already lost them. What would you tell a friend in your situation? Get out, protect yourself, don't look back. Funny how we can give advice we'd never take ourselves. Through these sessions, I started to understand something I'd been running from my whole life. My worth wasn't tied to how useful I was to other people. I didn't have to earn love through sacrifice. Real love, the kind worth having, didn't come with a price tag or a list of demands. The love I'd been giving my family was real, but what I'd been getting back was just the appearance of love, a performance they maintained as long as I was useful. And the moment I started questioning that arrangement, the mask would slip. I knew it would. I was terrified of it. But Sister Margaret reminded me that the truth, however painful, was still better than a beautiful lie. So I started preparing for the confrontation I knew had to happen. I gathered every document I could find related to the loan, my credit reports, the payment records showing I'd made the last 3 payments myself. I practiced what I'd say in the mirror, trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to collapse into tears or rage. I wanted to be calm, clear, unmovable. I wanted them to see that I was done being their safety net. But I also wanted, desperately, for them to apologize, to admit what they'd done was wrong, to somehow make it right. I knew they wouldn't, but hope is a stubborn thing. Sister Margaret helped me prepare in ways I hadn't expected. She taught me breathing techniques for staying calm during confrontation. She helped me write out what I wanted to say, editing it down to the essential truths. Don't let them make it about the house or the kids or anything except what they did, she advised. They'll try to redirect. Stay focused. You're not there to negotiate. You're there to set boundaries. We did role-playing exercises that felt silly at first, but turned out to be invaluable. She played my brother, throwing out every excuse and manipulation tactic she could think of. But family helps each other, she'd say in a mock defensive tone. And I'd practice responding calmly. Family asks for help. They don't take it without permission. Over and over until the words felt natural, until I could say them without my voice shaking. The opportunity came faster than I expected. Victor called to invite me to a family barbecue at the house. It's been too long since we all got together, he said, like the last month of silence had been my fault. Carmen misses you. The kids ask about Aunt Maria all the time. I could have said no. I could have told him I was busy or sick or just not interested. But I wanted to see their faces when I said what I needed to say. I wanted witnesses. So I said yes, I'd be there. And I spent the next 2 days rehearsing my speech until the words felt like stones in my mouth, heavy and solid. The day before the barbecue, I had one more session with Sister Margaret. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Terrified," I admitted. Part of me still wants to just pretend everything's fine. Show up, eat a burger, play with the kids, go home. And the other part. The other part knows that if I don't do this, I'll spend the rest of my life being their emergency fund, their fallback plan, their doormat. She nodded. You know what you need to do. Trust yourself. I wanted to, but trust felt like a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. The day of the barbecue was brutally hot, typical Phoenix summer, the kind of heat that makes your car steering wheel too hot to touch, and your sunglasses slide down your sweaty nose. I drove to the house, my house. The house my parents had filled with love and laughter, the house that now represented everything I'd lost. Cars lined the street. Extended family, apparently. Aunts, uncles, cousins I saw maybe twice a year. Perfect. The more people there, the harder it would be for Victor and Carmen to control the narrative. I parked down the block, needing a moment to collect myself. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I pulled out my phone and texted Sister Margaret. "I'm here. I'm scared." She responded immediately. "You're brave. You're strong. You're doing the right thing. I'm praying for you." I took 3 deep breaths, grabbed my folder of documents, and walked to the house. I walked into the backyard carrying nothing, no dish to share, no gift for the kids, just myself and my folder of documents. Victor was at the grill, flipping burgers like he didn't have a care in the world. Carmen was setting out plates. Elena stood by the cooler looking uncomfortable, and when she saw me, her face went pale. She knew something was coming. I'd texted her the night before, just 3 words. "I'm done hiding." She'd responded with a string of worried emojis, but no actual words, which told me everything about where her loyalties still lay. The backyard looked exactly like I remembered from childhood. Dad's old picnic table, refinished, but still bearing the carved initials from when Victor was 12. Mom's garden along the back fence, overgrown now but still recognizable. The tire swing hanging from the oak tree. This place held so many good memories. Birthday parties, graduation celebrations, lazy Sunday afternoons. And they'd taken it all and turned it into a crime scene. I helped myself to a soda from the cooler, making small talk with Aunt Rosa about her new grandchild, with Uncle Eddie about the Diamondbacks season. Normal conversation that felt surreal given what I was about to do. Carmen approached me cautiously. "Maria, I'm so glad you came. I wasn't sure you would." She moved to hug me, and I stepped back. The hurt on her face was genuine, which almost made me laugh. She could feel hurt by my physical boundary, but saw nothing wrong with stealing my identity. I waited until everyone had food, until the conversation was flowing and people were relaxed. Then I stood up, right there in the middle of the patio, and I spoke. My voice shook at first, but it got stronger with each word. "I need everyone to hear something," I said. The chatter died down. People turned to look at me, confused. Victor's smile faltered. 6 months ago, someone in this family took out a loan for $25,000 in my name without my knowledge or permission. They forged my signature. They damaged my credit. And when I found out, they told me I was making a big deal out of nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the neighbor's dog barking 3 houses down. Aunt Rosa's fork clattered against her plate. Uncle Eddie coughed. I kept going, pulling out the bank statements, the credit reports, showing them to anyone who would look. I've paid the last 3 payments myself because they stopped paying. I'm 52 years old, and my credit is ruined because I trusted my family. I looked directly at Victor. His face had gone red, a mix of anger and shame. Carmen looked like she wanted to disappear. "I'm not doing this to embarrass you," I continued, though that was partially a lie. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the humiliation I'd felt. "I'm doing this because I'm done being silent. I'm done pretending everything's fine. And I'm done being the family's emergency fund." Victor stood up, defensive. "You're making us sound like criminals. We were going to pay you back. We just hit a rough patch." I laughed, and it sounded bitter even to my own ears. A rough patch that lasted 6 months? A rough patch that started with forging my signature? Carmen tried to interject, voice trembling. "We thought you'd understand. We thought you'd want to help save the family home." And there it was, the manipulation I'd been expecting. Make it about the house, about family, about anything except their choices. "You didn't give me a choice," I said quietly. "You just took what you wanted and expected me to deal with the consequences. That's not family, that's theft." Aunt Rosa stood up then, her voice sharp. "Victor, is this true? Did you really forge Maria's signature?" Victor's jaw clenched. "It's more complicated than she's making it sound. The house needed major repairs. We couldn't get approved for enough on our own. Maria was already helping with the mortgage. We thought—" "You thought you'd commit fraud instead of having an honest conversation," Uncle Eddie interrupted. He turned to me. "Do you have proof?" I handed him the credit report, the loan documents with the forged signature. He studied them, his face growing darker. "This is identity theft, Victor. This is serious." "She's family," Victor shouted. "She wasn't supposed to even find out. We had it under control." The admission hung in the air. He'd just confessed, in front of everyone, that the plan had been to deceive me indefinitely, Carmen's face went white. "Victor, stop talking," she hissed. But he couldn't stop. The defensive anger had taken over. "You all don't understand the pressure we're under. 3 kids, 1 income, this house falling apart. Maria doesn't have kids. She doesn't have a mortgage. She has all this extra money just sitting there while we're drowning. We needed help, and she would have said yes anyway." "But I didn't say yes," I said. My voice was steady now, clear. "You didn't ask, and that's the difference between family helping family and family exploiting family." The barbecue ended shortly after that. People made excuses and left, taking their potato salad and their discomfort with them. Elena hugged me on her way out, whispering, "I'm sorry." Like that could fix anything. Aunt Rosa told me I was brave, which felt both validating and sad, because bravery shouldn't be required to stand up to your own family. Uncle Eddie pulled me aside. "You need a lawyer?" he asked quietly. "I know someone, family rate." I thanked him, told him I already had one. He nodded, squeezed my shoulder, and left. By sunset, it was just me, Victor, and Carmen in the backyard. The grill had gone cold. The uneaten food sat on the table, attracting flies. We stood there in the dying light, and Victor finally said what I'd been waiting to hear. Not an apology. Just, "So what now? You going to press charges? Destroy the family over money?" I wanted to tell him he'd already destroyed the family when he decided I was worth less than $25,000. I wanted to tell him about the nights I'd spent crying, the relationship I'd given up, the life I'd put on hold for people who saw me as a resource. But I was tired. So tired. Instead, I said, "I'm blocking you from ever accessing my credit again. I'm not paying any more of your loans, and I'm done covering your expenses. If the house goes into foreclosure, that's your problem to solve." Carmen gasped like I'd slapped her. Victor's jaw clenched. "After everything we've done for you," he started, but I cut him off. "What have you done for me, Victor? Really? When have you ever sacrificed anything for me the way I've sacrificed for you?" He couldn't answer. They both stood there, and I realized they genuinely believed they'd done nothing wrong. In their minds, I was being selfish. I was putting money over family. I was the one breaking the bond. And maybe I was. But it was a bond that had been strangling me for years, and I was finally cutting myself free. I walked away from that house, knowing I'd never go back. Not for holidays, not for birthdays, not for emergencies. I'd learned something they were still too comfortable to understand. You can't keep setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. In the months that followed, they tried different tactics to get me back in line. Victor called crying, apologizing, promising to pay me back. Carmen showed up at my apartment unannounced, begging me not to abandon the family. Elena acted as mediator, trying to get everyone to just talk it out. But I'd done something I'd never done before. I'd set a boundary and actually enforced it. I didn't answer calls I didn't want to take. I didn't open my door when I didn't want visitors. I stopped explaining myself, stopped justifying my decisions, stopped seeking their approval. It felt wrong at first, like I was breaking some sacred rule. Then it started to feel like freedom. The loan continued to be a problem. Even though I'd frozen my credit and blocked them from using my information again, I was still legally responsible for the existing debt. My lawyer suggested I had grounds to sue, but litigation would take years and cost more than I had. I could report the fraud to the police, but that meant potentially seeing my brother arrested, charged, maybe imprisoned. As angry as I wasn't sure I could do that. So I did something else. I started paying the loan myself, but I negotiated with the bank to refinance it in my name only, removing Victor and Carmen completely. It took another hit to my credit and required me to take on a second part-time job on weekends, but it meant they had no claim to the family house anymore. When the deed transferred to my name alone, I sold the house within a month. Victor was furious. He called me every name he could think of, told me I'd betrayed Mom and Dad's memory, said I'd destroyed the family. But the house sold for enough to pay off the loan, cover the realtor fees, and leave me with a small nest egg I put in an account they could never touch. I didn't keep anything from the house. No photos, no furniture, no sentimental objects. I let them take what they wanted and donated the rest. I needed a clean break, no threads connecting me to that chapter of my life. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it hurt less than watching them destroy me piece by piece while calling it love. The day of the closing, I drove by the house one last time. The new owners were already moving in, a young family with twin toddlers. I watched them carry boxes through the front door, laughing about something, and I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. That house had held my entire childhood, my parents' love, my sense of belonging. But it had also become a weapon used against me. Letting it go meant letting go of the illusion that I could ever get back what I'd lost. My family wasn't coming back. The people I'd loved had shown me who they really were. And the house was just a building, after all. The real home I needed to build was within myself. Statistics say that after 6 months of separation from an abusive situation, the trauma bond decreases by only 27%. I learned that from a support group I'd started attending, a group for people dealing with family estrangement. Hearing that number helped me understand why I still felt so drawn to answer Victor's calls, why I still felt guilty for setting boundaries, why part of me wanted to believe his apologies were real. The bond wasn't just going to disappear. I had to actively work to break it every day, sometimes every hour. But with each month that passed, it got a little easier. I threw myself into rebuilding. Not just my credit score, though that was part of it. I rebuilt my sense of self. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do and yes to things I'd always been too busy for. I took a pottery class at the community center. I joined a book club. I adopted a cat from the shelter, a grumpy orange tabby who wanted nothing to do with anyone, which felt appropriate. I learned that I actually liked my own company, that silence didn't have to be lonely, that I could be enough just as I was. These were small things, but they added up to something that felt like a life worth living. Sister Margaret continued to meet with me monthly. We'd sit in her small office with terrible coffee and talk about forgiveness, about healing, about what it meant to move forward without carrying the past like luggage. She never told me I had to reconcile with my family. She never suggested I was wrong to protect myself. Instead, she helped me understand that forgiveness didn't require restoration of relationship. I could forgive Victor and Carmen for their humanity, their flaws, their choices, without ever letting them back into my life. Forgiveness was something I did for myself, not for them. It was releasing the anger that was poisoning me, not absolving them of responsibility. 1 year after the barbecue confrontation, I ran into Carmen at the grocery store. We both froze. She looked older, tired, and for a moment, I felt a pang of the old sympathy. Then I remembered who I was now, who I'd fought to become, and I felt nothing but a distant sadness for what could have been. She started to say something, stopped, then blurted out, "The kids miss you." It was a guilt trip disguised as small talk, and a year ago it would have worked. I would have felt terrible. I would have questioned my choices. But now I just said, "I hope they're doing well," and walked past her to the checkout line. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't tighten. I'd finally let go. They never faced legal consequences for what they did. The fraud, the forgery, the manipulation, none of it resulted in arrests or trials or justice in the traditional sense. Victor and Carmen are still living in Phoenix, still together, still presumably using other people to solve their problems. Sometimes I see their posts on social media, the algorithm cruel enough to show me their happy family photos, despite my attempts to block them. Part of me wants to comment, to remind everyone looking at those smiling faces what they did to me. But I don't, because my peace isn't dependent on their punishment. They have to live with who they are. I get to live free of them. Do you think that was fair? I've asked myself that question 1,000 times. Should they have faced more consequences? Should I have pushed harder for legal action? Would that have given me more closure? Or would it have just dragged me through more pain? I don't have a clean answer. Some days I think I let them off too easy. Other days I'm grateful I chose to protect my peace over pursuing revenge. What would you have done in my place? Would you have reported the fraud, sued for damages, cut them off like I did? Or would you have tried to work it out to save the relationship? I'm genuinely curious because I'm still learning to trust that I made the right choice. But here's what I know for certain. I'm 53 now, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm not responsible for anyone else's crisis. I work my regular hours at the dental office, come home to my cat and my small apartment, and I sleep through the night. My credit score is slowly recovering. I'm dating someone, a kind man who thinks my boundaries are healthy, not selfish. I'm learning Spanish through an app because I always wanted to but never had time. I'm planning a trip to New Mexico next spring, just me and the open road. These are small victories, but they're mine. My rebirth didn't come from getting revenge or seeing Victor and Carmen suffer. It came from choosing myself over the version of family that required my suffering. I found peace in spirituality, in meditation, in learning to sit with uncomfortable emotions without running from them or drowning them in other people's needs. I started each morning with gratitude for what I had instead of resentment for what I'd lost. I learned that I didn't need a big family or even a present family to be whole. I just needed to be present with myself. Before I end my story, I want to share something important I learned through all of this. It's about recovery, about what's possible when you're coming out of family trauma and financial abuse. A lot of people think once you're damaged, you're broken forever. That's not true. Recovery is possible, but it requires real work and honest self-assessment. First, understand that healing isn't linear. You'll have good days where you feel strong and clear-headed, and bad days where you want to call them and apologize for setting boundaries. Both are normal. Don't judge yourself for the bad days. Just notice them, learn from them, and keep moving forward. Second, rebuild your identity separate from your role in the family system. For years, I was the reliable sister, the helper, the fixer. When I stepped out of that role, I had to figure out who I was without it. This meant trying new things, even things I failed at, just to discover what brought me joy, independent of anyone else's approval. Get therapy if you can afford it. Join support groups if you can't. Read books about family systems and trauma bonds. Educate yourself about the patterns so you can recognize them and not repeat them. Third, protect yourself financially. Open new bank accounts at different institutions. Freeze your credit. Set up alerts for any unusual activity. Change passwords to something they couldn't guess. Get your mail sent somewhere they don't know about. It feels paranoid, but people who violated your boundaries once will do it again if given the opportunity. Practical protection is part of recovery. Fourth, build a chosen family. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and loyalty doesn't require blood. Find people who show up for you without conditions, who respect your boundaries, who celebrate your growth instead of resenting it. These relationships might take time to develop, but they're worth the investment. For me, it was the women in my book club, Sister Margaret, my neighbor who waters my plants when I'm away. Small connections that add up to something sturdy. And finally, forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for staying too long, for missing the red flags, for believing their excuses, for loving people who didn't love you the same way back. You did the best you could with the information you had. You stayed because you're loyal and hopeful and kind, not because you're stupid. Those qualities aren't weaknesses just because someone exploited them. They're part of what makes you human. The goal isn't to stop being kind. It's to be kind to yourself first. Recovery is possible. It won't look like getting your old family back. It won't look like revenge or public vindication or them finally understanding what they did wrong. It looks like waking up one day and realizing you haven't thought about them in a week. It looks like making plans for your future that don't include fixing their problems. It looks like choosing yourself over and over until it becomes automatic. And it is possible, I promise you, even when it feels impossible. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I know this was a long story, and if you're still here, I appreciate you more than I can say. I'm curious, what city are you listening from? What time is it where you are? Drop a comment and let me know. If this story resonated with you, if you've been through something similar or know someone who has, please hit the like button. It helps the algorithm show this to people who need to hear it. And if you want more stories about family dynamics, betrayal, and the complicated work of healing, subscribe to the channel. I've got more to share. I'd also suggest checking out my video about recognizing financial manipulation in relationships and the one about setting boundaries with family members who don't respect them. Both might give you additional tools if you're dealing with a difficult situation. Before you go, let me ask you one more time. What would you have done in my place? Would you have reported the fraud? Would you have tried harder to work things out? Do you think I should have pushed for legal consequences? Or was finding my own peace enough? I really want to know what you think. Your perspectives help me process this and might help someone else in the comments who's struggling with a similar decision. Until the next story, take care of your heart. Protect your peace. Remember that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. And you deserve to survive, to heal, to thrive. Thank you for listening to mine.